right, I am here. I'm so sorry. I was not here for a second, and that concerned me. I hope everyone has had a good day. Oh dear, I can hear myself louder than I should. Let's turn that down. Okay. Hi everyone. I hope everyone's had a good day. Sorry if this is running at a slightly. No, I'm actually on time. Oh, I thought I was going to be late. I had to make myself a quick cup of tea. Yes, we're all here at the start. I was gonna make myself some fancy tea, and then I didn't. I got distracted by things. Um, so I have very, very basic, just normal pomegranate tea, which I guess technically isn't, but it is. It's just a tea bag. Um, I hope everyone's had a good day. It's been a day for me. It's been better than some, not as good as others. I found out today that I really like taro tea. Um, so that was a fun adventure to have. Is that I really like this. Um, I also found out, and I'll talk about it in a little while. That despite having a lot of knowledge of one of the major topics of the book, um, I don't necessarily read books about this all the time. So with all of that, to say, this one's gonna be a little strange, a little off the rails. I mean, to be fair, what is normal when it comes to these? I always think, oh, I'm going to talk for X amount of time, and that's never what happens. Yeah, I have a mug of tea to help keep me awake, maybe, hopefully. No coffee today. Uh, yeah. So let's get into it. We are doing sunshine today. And yes, it is spooky season, and the name of the book is Sunshine, and we will get to the fun irony of that. Once again, it's meant to entertain and inform. I don't hold any of the rights to either the image, or the book covers, or uh, the works, the guts of the book. All right, and let's see if I have done this correctly this week. Maybe. Survey says yes. We are talking about Sunshine by Robin McKinley. Um, this is a personal favorite of mine. I don't. It's not one I read all the time, so it's not like it's a yearly tradition for me to sit down and read Sunshine during spooky season. But it is my. I want a spooky book that isn't a kid's book. Sunshine is that for me. Um, so it is my spooky. Okay, I had to put both of these on here because, as far as I can tell, these are both the original publication and they used the same cover. So I've put both of them down here. I don't know if one is US and one is UK, if that is the difference. But it was originally published in, I think, December of 2003 through Berkley, and early 2004 with Jove. I have the Jove paperback. Oh no. It's a full year apart. It's October of 2003 for Berkley and December 2004 with Jove. But I did find that the originals were the same cover, so they are both here, even though it's not entirely true. It isn't part of a series. And so this is the original cover. This is the cover I have. This is not my favorite cover. I will talk about it in a moment. And the photograph is by Masao Mukai or Photonica. I could not find anything on either. I could find some things called Photonica, and I could find several people by the name of Masao Mukai, but nothing to say that they were the same person who did this. Um, if you can't tell by this lovely creepy chandelier and bat motif, um, The topic of today's book is vampires. Which is why it's really funny when I get into this. It's like, oh, I don't actually read a lot of vampire books. I read a lot of books that have vampires in them, but not as, like, the main story element. The other covers, again, I couldn't find any of the illustrators for these. So you have the year and the publisher, and then a description of the covers. The 2010 cover put out by Speak is a shimmery, glittery, holographic yellow cover. This is my favorite. This is the one that I desperately need to... Oh, I didn't close the parentheses. We're gonna ignore the fact that I forgot to close the parentheses. That is the cover that I desperately need to own in addition to the one I have, because it's all shimmery and shiny. It's also the first cover that I saw of this book, and the whole reason I read this book was because it was shiny. I didn't know it was a vampire story when I first picked it up, because I am guilty of finding a pretty cover and not even flipping it over if I'm familiar with the author. I have great faith in certain authors, and I will, as you'll see later, and I will basically be like, this is going to be good because author. Can an author put out a stinker? Absolutely. That's not what happened here. I thought I put these in order. Jeez Louise. So much for putting them in order. The 2008 Berkeley cover, it has a girl sitting on the floor in a red dress, with a shackle and chain around one ankle. That is an image directly from the book itself, from within the first section. It's sort of a spoiler, but not really, because it is the base of what sets off the rest of the book. In the same sense that the chandelier with the bats is sort of a spoiler, but not really. And then the newest cover I found is the 2014 Kindle edition. It's also the ebook edition, and it's a couple of different ebook covers. But it's a black coffee cup on a black plate, and there's like blood on the rim of the coffee cup dripping down. It's very striking, like it looks good. Not one that I would want. Like I said, I really need to get my hands on one of the shiny covers, because it greatly appeals to me that this like sparkly, glittery, holographic cover, and it's this like soft, sunny yellow that's a la think like the Italian yellow, kind of like saffron. It's that yellow, nice and soft and old, but very much nothing about it says, I'm a vampire. All the other covers are very much, this is a vampire book. That cover is like, ooh, look, I'm pretty. On that note about the author, Robin McKinley, she currently lives in Scotland. From her own bio, she moved there shortly before the pandemic. This is a vampire story. Do not be fooled by me going, I love the shiny cover. This is a vampire story, and this is not a story about shiny vampires. I will cut that off at the pass. Yes. This is a vampire story. She won the Mythopoeic Award for Adult Literature for this novel, and she has retold a lot of fairy tales. This is why I saw the cover and I trusted her, and it's also why I didn't immediately assume, oh, this is a vampire story. She redoes a lot of fairy tales. She's done Beauty and the Beast. She's done Sleeping Beauty. She's done... I want to say she's done Rose Red. She retells a lot of fairy tales, and I greatly trust her with her retellings. So this is a book that, when I say I picked it up and trusted the author, I picked it up and trusted the author. My tracking is a little funny. If I move that, is that better or worse? Better? Better. Okay. So that is Robin McKinley. Here's what you need to know. It has no chapters. Buckle up. It is post almost apocalypse. It is vampires. I debated on changing the vampires to red just because, spooky month and vampires, but I'm like, I have a system. We're just gonna go with the system. And it is mundane mixed with magic. I think later I call it magic mixed with mundane. What you need to understand is it is a very dense novel that goes into both the very boring and the very interesting. And sometimes they overlap. Sometimes the boring things are interesting, and sometimes the interesting things are boring. So, no chapters can be unforgiving. If I'm not using a bookmark, which I'll admit, I should probably use more bookmarks. If I'm not using a bookmark, I will memorize either like a couple of sentences or a page number, so this isn't a huge problem for me. However, if you're hoping for chapters to help you, it doesn't have them. It has sections, like section 1 and then section 2, that kind of act as like mid-season cliffhangers on a TV show. It's very much and we're ending here, and then summer break happens and you come back and they're like, I spent a month at a thing. Except you didn't spend a month at a thing. You might have moved forward in time like a couple of weeks. I think at one point you move forward a month. So in that sense, it very much feels like a TV show. But it is a very dense book. That's why I put it here. Normally I would just be give an overview and be like, oh, it's a slow read. It is dense. It is. I do not recommend sitting down and power reading your way through this one. I also do not recommend taking an excessively long time to get through it. Read a little bit every day, so that you don't lose yourself in it. Because there are times where your main character will talk about baking, or she'll talk about being tired, or she'll talk about like some of the setting, and you will be like, all right, I'm with you. And then you'll like take a nap or sleep or go to work and come back and be like, I remember nothing, lady. You best re-explain, or I have to back up. My version is 405 pages. It's very interesting. It is very slow. It has very few breaks. The other thing about this that I will mention here is that it is in first person. I have not read a first person novel in a long time. Once upon a time it was my bread and butter, and I read everything in first person, and I'm like, first person is the best version. I must read first person. And I have not read first person in a long time because I realized I liked having third person limited or third person omniscient much better. It's like, I want to know what's happening 30 miles away. That could be interesting. With how dense this book is, I understand why she didn't do that. Because I think I would have the yearning to be like, but what's happening at the lake? I want to know what's happening at the lake. You do not know beyond what the character knows. It very much locks you into that path. It also means that while your main character, Ray, info dumps a lot, it doesn't feel like an info dump because it's stream of consciousness. You can absolutely imagine she is just like chatting in her head of, oh, this is like this because of the war with the others. And of course there's bad spots around the lake now. And I used to grow up here. All of this is in the first section, by the way. I used to go here when I was a kid. Isn't that weird? And then stuff happens in vampires. It is a post-almost apocalypse. So I say that. This gives a brief explanation of what I mean. It is almost modern. It is early 2000s. It feels early 2000s, in that the internet is not called the internet, but it is a thing, but it is not like smartphone in your pocket. Um, it has a lot of your hallmarks of your like post-apocalyptic dystopian stuff. There was a massive war, that the human non-magical people call the Voodoo Wars, um, that primarily took place between magic people, non-magic, magic humans. Let me back up. Magic humans, non-magic humans, and things called others. Others is a very detailed subset that is like anything that isn't human. So it is vampires, it is wares, and it is demons primarily, are the three that are mentioned in the book the most. Those are all considered other. Wares are not limited to wolves, and in fact, she points out that wares are most commonly not wolves, they're just the ones that are popular. um, but so that's who the war was against and with, and you don't get a clear picture of it because she was a child. So it's very recent memory, and it kind of reshaped a lot of things. It put the small town that this takes place in is a small town by what we in the modern world would consider small, but it used to be a small town that became big because after this everything kind of went crazy. I feel like I should have retitled this as too slightly spoilery, but all of this is in the first section. So if you can get through section 1, I shouldn't be giving you anything for after that. So that is what I mean by almost post. So this is one of my favorite vampire novels. After trying to think of other vampire novels for recommendations for later on, I realized this is probably one of the only vampire novels I really read. But vampires in this are not cute, they're not cuddly, they are very scary, very other, and it very much follows a la Buffy the Vampire Slayer rules of the older it is, the scarier it is. In that the master looked a whole lot less human than Spike. This follows those rules. It is very much a predator-prey thing of, oh, there's a vampire in the room? Yeah, your body may know it even though your mind doesn't. Like, the adrenaline's gonna be pumping even if you're just like, huh? I really like this. So, this came out early 2000s. And was kind of, I did read Twilight, and this was kind of a breath of fresh air as, hey, let's make these things scary again. So at the time, I was also watching Moonlight. So, like, I was into vampires at the time. I had my vampire phase. I enjoyed Moonlight. I enjoyed Buffy. I enjoyed a little bit of Angel at the time, not much. But this was, even with that, this was the first one that's like, oh, by the way, just to remind you, these things are inhuman and you don't want to be one. This is very much not a story of, oh, but what if I became one and wouldn't that be romantic? And, oh, how lovely. It's like, no, no, no. These things are terrifying. I want nothing to do with them. Also, interestingly enough, part of why I like the vampires in this book so much is because they kind of follow some of the old, like, Fae rules of, like, names are important and things being same versus other, and how how does something that is so inhuman see homogeny? All humans are humans. All forest is forest. All lake is lake. That kind of thing. How does something that is so far beyond a human see these things, where we would be like, oh no, that's the pine forest, and then beyond it there's like the weird swampy bit. They're like, yeah, no, all that tree stuff, that's all tree stuff. It's all the same. Is there something not tree stuff in the tree stuff? That stands out. Yes. So that is how very other the vampires are in this book, and they do call them other. Anything not human is other, which gets real fun when you run into the people who are part, and that is another big thing through it. But then you have magic mixed with mundane. So your main character is a baker who only uses ingredients when she needs them. You get pretty far into section 1 of this novel, and like even into section 2, before you realize that this world has like heavy magic, because your main character is a baker in a coffee house. And so the things she thinks about, she's obsessed with vampires, more with knowing about them than with actually vampires. But she's a baker. She likes being a baker. She likes her little kingdom of her bakehouse. And so you get pretty far in before you realize, oh, this isn't just a book about normal humans and maybe vampires. You've got various levels of magic. You've got various levels of other. You've got like charms and things that like they beep or whistle, or you have wards that create a web around your house, or like things that are very deep lore kind of magic. But she's giving it to you in such a like steady way. Like, oh, you don't find out about like wards around houses until she actually starts thinking about, oh, I need to go home. Let me think about my home, and oh, I've got these wards, and I don't let my boyfriend through them, so they have no holes because they only ever have to protect me. And if they had to protect more people, they would be more likely to have holes, which is why the coffee shop doesn't have wards. Like, there's this big ol' long stream of consciousness, which is part of why it's such a dense read, is because it's stream of consciousness, and I am not familiar with reading stream of consciousness like I used to be. Once upon a time, that was primarily what I read. That is no longer true. So this is a very good book. It is a very dense book. It is also, it is for an older audience than I think any of the others I've talked about. Like, even Assassin's Apprentice could probably be read by a younger audience than this one. For all that one had, like, death and murder in it. This one has... Well, A, it's first person on a lot of things, and B, there's a lot of viscera and gore and just straight up creepy things that are first person. You see it through her eyes. You see the things that happen to her, around her, because of her, and it's like, oh... Yeah, this is for a much older audience. Very much an adult's book. Could a teen get by? Probably. Older teen, definitely. High school sophomores, probably the youngest I would put this at. And even then, it depends on the kid. Look, if they can get through, I'm trying to think. Hang on. If they can get through like Shakespeare's sonnets without giggling and actually understanding what's going on and that some of those are in fact giggle worthy, they can probably read this. Maybe. But yeah, it's not a YA book by any means. All right, recommendations for post-apocalypse. Um, one of these things is much younger than the others. City of Ember by Jean Duprat is in an underground. So it takes place post-apocalypse, duh. But it is an underground city that runs off of light bulbs. So the ember is kind of the glow of the lights, and the city has had to keep pulling in and in because the electricity is running out, and it deals with that problem. It is a children's book, so while that sounds grim and dark and dire, and from an adult's perspective it very much is, this is a children's book. Your main character is a child. So it is a little lighter than it sounds on the surface, but post-apocalyptic children's books are kind of... Having read several, they always hit a little differently when adults read them than when kids read them. Because I have read both The City of Ember and Eager as a kid, both a kid and an adult. And when I read it as a kid, it was a fun adventure story. Kind of on par with like the Boxcar Children. Like, it was more detailed than the Boxcar Children, but that was the kind of feel. This is a good old adventure. We can just go along and do things. And then reading it as an adult, you're like, oh my gosh, this is in fact awful. This is terrifying. Same with Eager, which could have gone on this list. Next is Shipbreaker by Paolo Bacialupi? Bacialupi? It is... Oh gosh, is his name Nail or Rivet? His name is some welding tool, joint maker thing. I want to say it's Rivet? It might be Nailer. Point being, it's set in the post-apocalypse. It is, the ships in question are seafaring ships. And it is an adventure story that takes him to inland, swampy places. He is not very well off. He's a bit of a street rat in it. So that follows him. Cinder, which is one I covered not too long ago, is post-apocalypse, and it is the one where you have humans, you have androids, which are things, and you have cyborgs, which are also things that are part human, and the problems that come with that. It's the one that has the moon people, and Cinder is the retelling of Cinderella. And then there's Dragonflight. So Dragonflight is technically post-apocalyptic science fantasy. And I put Dragonflight on here and not the White Dragon, because the White Dragon is a terrible entry point. So Dragonflight is the first book in the Dragon Riders of Pern Chronicles by Anne McCaffrey. I love some of these. I will admit, I don't like all of them. But I do have a soft spot for Dragonflight. And it is It is post-apocalypse, but it is so far post-apocalypse that they have forgotten the technology. Your technology is dragons. um, I don't think you find any technology in Dragonflight as you go through the Dragon Riders of Pern series, and then the Master Harper of Pern, and then the White Dragon. More technology does come into play. It as it is rediscovered and reawakened and stuff like that. But technically, Dragonflight, a fantasy novel almost completely about dragons and worm kind, and the people who ride and care for them, is in fact a post-apocalypse. It's just so far post-apocalypse, it's almost Studio Ghibli. Yeah. If Studio Ghibli preferred dragons to forests. And then this one, I've only got 3, and one of them is a big old caveat, and I need to apologize for that ahead of time. So the first one is Peeps by Scott Westerfeld. It is not vampires in the usual situation. It is vampires as though vampires carried a parasite. So parasite positive is Peeps. I want to say it's set in the same world as Uglies. If it's not, the world is just as fleshed out. So if you've read Uglies Pretty Specials extras, if you have faith in Scott Westerfeld, this is another one. This is his vampires one. I have not read this one in a long time. I remember reading it, but it has been a long time. Then I have Bunnicula by James Howe. It is a children's book. It is technically a mystery. So things like Celery Stalks at Midnight, Bunnicula, The Return of Bunnicula. There's a whole bunch of them. Bunnicula's a rabbit who drains the vegetable juices from the vegetables and turns them white. And your main characters are, in fact, dogs. So it is a children's book. It is probably my favorite on this list. And it was as I was remembering Bunnicula that I realized I don't read books specifically about vampires. And I'm like, oh, this is harder to recommend than I thought. And then the last one on here is An Exercise in Trust from me. And it is The Coldest Girl in Cold Town by Holly Black. So, here's the fun disclaimer. I have not read this since it came out as its own novel. There's a short story version. There was an excerpt version from a long time ago that I really enjoyed. And it's another one where the vampires are very much predators. Much like Sunshine, they are not something to aspire to be. Cold towns are walled off areas in cities that, oh yeah, you can go in, but you cannot come out. And they're basically dens of hedonism. They are sexy, they are parties, they are flashy. They will probably end with death for a human. So if you choose to go to a wild party in Cold Town, you will probably end up dead, and or you'll wind up a vampire. Like, you don't get to leave Cold Town once you go in. So that being said, I have not read this full novel. I have read the excerpts, and I did enjoy them because I enjoy Holly Black. She's done a lot of like fair folk kind of work, and while I don't always love her interpretations, they're valid interpretations. I don't have to like them, and it's not typically because I dislike how they're written. some of her characters are very believable, but not very likable. And sometimes I would like to read books about likable characters. So that is Sunshine. Let me turn that off. How do I get rid of? There we go. So yeah, that is Sunshine. I didn't realize, like I said, I've read a lot of like vampire adjacent books. Um, but not actually many vampire books. And it was as I was like, oh, but I've read. I'm like, no, wait. I had a lot of friends who read vampire books. I had a lot of friends who read Vampire Academy, who read Blue Bloods, who read the House of Night series, who read the boy version of the House of Night series, which I don't remember what that was called. Yeah. But I had friends who read them. I had friends who read all of the vampire books. So I saw them all the time. And, like, if I go and look at covers, I'm like, oh, I remember these covers. And I'm like, but I didn't read them. I had friends who read them. So that was a fun realization of, oh no, vampires show up in a lot of stories, but they aren't the point. And I was looking for books where vampires were the point. I could have put Twilight on the list, and I didn't. If you want to read it, go ahead. I'm not going to recommend it. Besides, odds are you already know about it. But yeah, Sunshine is a lot of fun. It is. Your very boring main character does wind up to be not very boring at all. And she isn't Mary Sue levels exactly, because the world doesn't like warp and alter to fit her. It's more of things are revealed to her. But she does end up pretty powerful. But she's not. She's powerful, but she doesn't want it. But she's also not the whiner of, oh, but I don't want this power. It's too hard. No. No, she's very much of, I would just like to go back to baking, please. Thank you. Whatever this is, can it leave me alone? I would like to make, death by chocolate. So that's a nice thing. I don't mind a powerful character, and I don't mind a character that gets like a little bit of power creep going on. But yeah, she is borderline. Oh yeah, I would absolutely eat Death by Chocolate. She is, like I said, she is borderline Mary Sue, but she doesn't feel like a Mary Sue. Because like I said, it's not like the world warps to fit her. Does she do some impossible things? Yes. Yes, she does. But it's kind of established that there's a reason she can do them. And it's not like she gets away scot-free with stuff. Kind of like how in the Young Wizard series, for every magic there's a cost. There is a cost to everything. Whether it is red tape or in relationships tearing apart, or like an actual physical cost. I will say, as someone who does enjoy baking, I really wish like there were actual recipes for some of the things that she rattles off at one point, because when she first meets one of the vampires, he's like, talk to me, and so she just starts talking about making cinnamon rolls, and I'm like, your cinnamon rolls sound great. I need a recipe, and I need a recipe for all the other things in this book. And I don't think Robin McKinley made those recipes, but much like the Redwall books make me wish for the food, this makes me wish for the food. um, I also find it funny that it's fairly early on you find out that the coffee house also serves champagne. I'm like, this is the weirdest coffee house ever. I think I would love it. Come get cinnamon rolls and coffee and breakfast and also champagne if you want it. um it feels very well, even that's a bit too pretty. I was gonna say it feels a bit like Supernatural, in the way that uh but that's not right either. Um there isn't really a direct comparison for it. Um because it's not the happy teeny bop that is Buffy for all of its seriousness and problems. Um and it's not the uh it's not like Supernatural exactly. And I mean, it's a little more like Supernatural than Buffy because there's a lot more like monstery bits. Um the ending, without spoiling it, the ending you will either like, accept, or hate. There is no I don't think anybody would love it. But it is kind of the most divisive part of the whole thing. So, all of that being said, and my tea being just meh, because it is teabag tea, and it's kind of cold, at this point. Yeah, so vampires and spooky season. This is the most spooky book that we are going to be talking about because I don't do spooky things. Yay! Um, I have one more semi spooky book planned for November 1st. It is I have mentioned it at least twice before. I love it. Uh it makes me happy. It is a children's book. um but yeah, so it is we are deep in October. Um Sorry, I just for some reason my brain just went, "Hey, it's not Wednesday," and I had to do some quick math and be like, "No, it is Wednesday. I'm not completely crazy. Sorry." But we are deep in October and running up on Halloween. So yeah, I thought a scary vampire story is a good one. Um, I don't mind vampire stories. So, um, I like the different iterations of vampire. Oh man, no, you are not the only one who was like, what is today?" Uh, I desperately want it to be Friday. Um, um, I don't mind the different iterations of vampires, because I find it interesting. So you've got the ones like Nosferatu and all, where sunlight burns them, and then you've got the ones like Dracula, where sunlight makes them basically just dudes. and they can't transform. And then you've got your super sexy vampires that are like, look at me, I'm super sexy, and that's their whole business. Um, you've got your Twilight ones that they sparkle in the sunlight, and fire is basically their problem. Fire and beheading. And then you've got the ones that are like, oh yeah, maybe that was once a human body, but now it's just like terror on legs. um, I will also say that your main vampire in Sunshine, his name makes me happy. Because my brain immediately goes to DC Comics. Um, and that little nerd part of my brain is like, hooray! um, but yes, I enjoy the variety of vampire stories. It's kind of like I'm glad that early 2000s and into the 20 teens, and it's continued on till now, like more and more stories have come out that are like fair folk, fae, Celtic mythology type fairies, as opposed to Tinkerbell fairies. Because it's like, yes, give me all of your interpretations of these. Are they evil? Are they good? Are they tricksters? Are they manipulators? Are they liars? Are they cheaters? Um, it's very interesting for me because in most of the old stories, um, the tricksters are not the fairies. The tricksters are the humans who made a deal and then were like, I don't like this deal. I'm going to go back on it and be as tricksy as possible. And the fairies end up with the short stick on that. Either dead or cheated. Um, so that's part of why I like Holly Black, is she does a lot of that. I like I like things that can have multiple interpretations. Um, it's kind of what I like about theater and like Greek stuff, like Greek mythology and stuff. Um, is that you can see the same thing done by a different person and it can be interpreted differently. And I'm not going to say there's never a wrong interpretation because there absolutely are. Um, but I am more willing to accept a interpretation of something like that where it's a little squishier than a retelling of something that's got hard facts behind it. Um, oh, excuse me. Like if you're gonna retell Greek mythology, and I don't know, make it so Hades is evil because that's a popular opinion. Um, I'm less like I will be grumpy about it, sure, but I am less likely to be like, no, that's awful than other things. Um, I mean, as it is, I kind of have to put up with the fact that the Romans made Pluto a god of wealth and synchronized him with Hades, and those two don't exactly go together. But sure, Rome, you do you. You conquer everything and just sort of be like, all of it is real. They are the great equalizers. They're like all of these myths, they're all real. Before Neil Gaiman did it, Rome did it. And no, Neil Gaiman is not the first author to do it either. But American God sticks out. So, favorite spooky monster? Um, I'm not actually sure what mine is. So, like, I have no problem with werewolves, but they're like not my jam. And I've clearly enjoyed books with vampires, but I don't like seek them out. I think my problem is I'm not a huge like monster person. Um I don't typically like zombies. Uh hmm. I'm not into Cthulhu and existential horror. That's the thing. I'm not into existential horror, and most of the scary monsters are supposed to inspire that. um, I mean, I guess Jekyll and Hyde, which sounds like a cop out because is it really a monster? I don't know. Um, it is in the retellings. But yeah, no, Cthulhu's not my thing. Frankenstein's monster. Like, I've read Frankenstein and I've read several things that have Frankenstein's monster. Uh, they're fine, I guess. Um, oh, I didn't put the Monster High books on the list, so I thought about this. Because I realized I haven't read them. I've read the Ever After High, which is the fairy tales. I have not read the Monster High books, but they also got a vampire because they have Draculaura, which is Dracula's daughter. Uh, let's see. I'm not a huge ghost fan. Look, I'm a big fraidy cat, so like finding a favorite spooky monster is unlikely. Because that's like, oh, I don't really like all of them. Like my idea of a terrifying horror movie is Miss Frisbee and the Rats of Nim because I'm pretty sure that's a Don Bluth and oh boy could that man make children's horror. Um yeah. Um I mean I guess vampires is what I'm gonna have to go with. So the problem is they're not always spooky, and sometimes whatever. That is the one I like the best. I just don't like the spooky bits. um, but I'd rather deal with that than most werewolf stories are not my thing at all. Um, Although I do enjoy the BBC version of Being Human. That one's fun. That's a ghost, a werewolf, and a vampire. They're all fine. All right. right, so it looks like it's gonna be another short one today. Uh, even though I have tea, I have apparently run through my book because I don't want to spoil. Look, I will say this: it is hard when it doesn't have chapters, and it's this dense to talk about it without spoiling anything. So it's like all of this stuff is in section 1. I can talk about it because it's at the beginning, but even then, that's like not a short number of pages. Hang on, let's see. Hang on. Part 1, in the book I have, in the version I have, part 1 is 86 pages out of 405. So, yeah, it's at the beginning. It's in the first 100 pages, but hoo boy, does a lot happen in that first 100 pages. Next one will be the last spooky. It will. It's a children's book, and it's not. Look, if you like Coraline, if you like Nightmare Before Christmas, if you like Corpse Bride, this book is right up that alley. It scratches the spooky vibe itch without being actual scary. And it's surprisingly sweet for a scary book. So yeah, I will see you again on November 1st to wrap up Spooky. Until then.